Sufferin, Succotash. Welcome back to Genesis Does from Mr. MegaManFan. Sylvester and Tweety and Cagey Capers is our focus this week. The case is a little rough, but the insides are not so bad. Although the game, we'll get into whether that's bad or not in a minute. All Tweety wants is to play pranks on Sylvester and drive that cat crazy. The box claims this will play like a classic Warner Brothers cartoon on a 16 meg cartridge released in 1994. I assume there is a Mega Drive version of this game as well, but I do know there was never a Super Nintendo version of this game, nor was it ever released on Wii Virtual Console, so this is definitely a Genesis Does exclusive title. The cartridge appears to be in very nice shape. Can't remember the last time I played it before this video. It's been a little while. Again, with good reason. We'll see about that in a moment. You can tell this is a later Genesis release because they started making the manuals in black and white and not spending the money on color ink. But the manual itself is in good condition. Sometimes on these Genesis games, I have ones where people wrote in codes or wrote passwords or spilled Kool-Aid all over them, but not in this case. It looks crisp, clean, a little wrinkled, but other than that, cosmetically it's in good shape. And now that would mean it's time to play the game. So as I was a big fan of Sylvester and Tweety cartoons growing up, this was definitely a game I wanted to have. I sort of thought it was a natural for there to be a platform Sylvester game chasing around Tweety Bird as he chants, I thought booty tat. I did thought booty tat. But of course, it's not just enough for a game to have voice samples of Sylvester and Tweety and side-scrolling platforming action. It's actually got to be fun to play. And that's where this 1994 Sega Genesis game starts to fall apart nearly quarter century after its original release, which may go to explain why it never made it onto the Wii Virtual Console or found any other kind of release. In fact, unlike recent re-releases like Aladdin and The Lion King, I don't see this one as a candidate, and not just because of the licensing issues, because obviously if they can be worked out by Disney, they can be worked out by Warner Brothers, they can be worked out by anybody. But the real reason would be you need a game that's worth re-releasing, and Aladdin and Lion King are both really good 1990s platformer games. This one has some issues, and how do I say, it could have been done right. They just didn't. Okay, here's the first thing. When you're trying to control Sylvester, it doesn't really move fluidly. Like, JonTron would call it a floaty game, but that's not even right. It's not just that Sylvester doesn't have the right momentum, it's that he has the wrong momentum. Like, he'll oversteer whenever you try to land on anything. He doesn't just land on platforms, he floats past them. And that's really bad because a lot of the obstacles in this game are things with very narrow ledges, like bookshelves and hanging lamps and tables. There's also the issue of how you traverse from one side of an area to another. You have to stack up boxes or stack up furniture or get furniture next to something you can land on top of for a split second and jump right off of. So there's a light switch here that appears to be completely useless. I can flip it on or off, but I can't do anything with it in either position. It's not like it turns off the lights in the room. The objects are also misleading. Like, this looks like it would be a door that would lead you to another area, but it doesn't. Also, Sylvester has claws, but he literally can't hurt a flea with them. Like, look, Granny is hitting me with a broom, and I'm absolutely defenseless. Like, why does Sylvester have claws if he can't use them on her? Now, I realize that never happens in the cartoons, but this is a video game, and he's a cat. So if you don't want him to attack other things, then don't give him emotion that he can paw with his claws. I mean, okay, you're just setting yourself up for a complaint from a reviewer or a game player when you make him a cat and then he doesn't get to do cat-like things. That's insufferable. Sufferin, Succotash, that's insufferable. And look at how easily he dies. Granny whacks him with the broom just a couple of times and he's dead. I mean, they give you 9 lives, so they obviously realized you were going to die a lot. That's also a cat pun on the saying that cats have 9 lives. But come on, when you make a platformer where you know you're going to die so many times that you actually do need 9 lives, you didn't design it very well. And as long as we're talking about whether it should be true to the cartoon it's based upon or not, well, if you decided that Sylvester can't actually hurt anybody because he doesn't get to do that with his claws in the cartoons, then why does he chase Tweety Bird to capture Tweety Bird? When in every Sylvester and Tweety cartoon ever, Tweety always foils Sylvester and he's the butt of the joke. Name me one time where he ever successfully ate Tweety Bird. Even if he got Tweety Bird into his mouth, he got hit with a broom from Granny or somebody else, and then Tweety flew out and said, "You bad old putty tat." Sylvester never wins, yet when you complete a level of Cagey Capers, he's holding Tweety in his hand like he's about to have dinner. He even says that at some point. They do have samples of the dialogue in there, and he says, "Hello, dinner." So obviously he's going to eat Tweety Bird, and then the next level starts like, "Nope, we're just back to our Cagey Capers again." No explanation whatsoever of how Tweety got away. You know what? If it was going to be authentic to the cartoons, then the level would start with Tweety Bird in a cage singing a song about a bad old putty tat, and then he would sneak up and try to unlock the cage, and then Tweety Bird would fly away, and the chase would be ongoing. It's like, okay, that's how you start a cartoon. You have Tweety escape from the cage when Sylvester tries to eat him. They can't even follow the basic premise right. Okay, another thing that just drives me crazy about this game is how you move furniture. You don't hit a button to pick it up, you just walk into it and pick it up automatically, which makes it very awkward to navigate a level left to right, because if you want to go to the left side of the screen and there's a piece of furniture there, you just pick it up. You don't even have a choice, you just pick it up. The game also likes to drop these really cryptic hints, like Sylvester Jr. standing there showing you what to jump on, where to go, but then you're going to try to do it, and you're going to just miss and bonk your head, and you take falling damage. That's another thing that makes this a little too much like Bubsy, is not only are the controls floaty, but falling damage is a real thing. Notice how hard it is to stand on any of these objects that you're supposed to jump to? Oh goody, now I'm picking up a table. That's the other thing about the claws. The only thing you can do with the claws is break down stacks of furniture. If you don't like them, you can just shred them apart. So your claws can destroy piles of objects, but you can't even pop a balloon. Now, I realize that would defeat the purpose here because you actually need to jump on them to traverse from one part of this stage to another, but seriously, why would a cat with claws not be able to destroy that? It just seems like the most easy, basic thing for a claw to just shred with the minimalist of effort. Furthermore, you wouldn't even be able to stand on them because cats have claws on their front and back legs. It's not like they only have claws in the front, even though Sylvester is only using his front claws. It's just, okay, again, everything about this is totally wrong. Even in the cartoons, I'm sure he would destroy that. Just touching it, just brushing against it, he probably would. But you're supposed to jump on them and stand on them? Why couldn't they have picked anything else for him to traverse vertically through an area with? Why couldn't they have just been floating platforms? Did they have to actually be a physical object existing in real space? Why couldn't they have been more bookshelves, like ones that pop in and out of the wall that you stand on, like a Crash Bandicoot area? I don't know with this game. It almost feels like they had the license for Sylvester and Tweety, and they were working on some other game, and then they just slapped graphics and vocal samples for Sylvester and Tweety into the game and said, now we're making appropriate use of our license, with no thought to the fact that it wouldn't actually feel like a good game. Furthermore, what are the point of these items that I'm picking up? Like the umbrellas, what are they supposed to do? Are they just for points? I've never actually been able to use them in any way in the game. and cue Ryan Taylor at this point because I'm sure he'll have some sort of explanation. That's one of the few good things about this game was that animation of Sylvester standing there rubbing his hands together evilly like, "Now I gotcha." One of the classic lines that he'll say to Tweety Bird. And I guess that's the other thing about having vocal samples in this game is there's enough of them to remind you of what Sylvester sounds like, but there's not enough of them to make up for everything else that's going on because most of the time he's not saying anything. It's like once in a blue moon you get a vocal sample. The rest of the time you get bupkis other than this background music, which gets really annoying after a very short amount of time. Unlike the Warner Brothers cartoons, the background music is not charming here. I would say that part of the reason Bugs Bunny cartoons were always so great, speaking of Warner Brothers cartoons, was that they so often sampled classical music. Now, the obvious reason they did that was to not have to pay copyright or royalties because most classical music that you would know and recognize is in the public domain, at least if it's from before the year 1900, it's in the public domain by now. There are 20th century composers who the copyright hasn't expired on yet. I could get into that whole thing, but I would defer to my wife because she plays cello, so she knows more about which works are in the public domain and which aren't. What I'm trying to say is, even though they had a reason to do it, it gave a certain charm to some of those old Bugs Bunny cartoons, to some of the old Warner Brothers cartoons, that you would hear these classical themes as these characters were doing zany things. So perhaps that's just a limitation of the hardware that they thought, well, we can't reproduce an orchestra here, so we'll create original music. But then I don't buy that because some of the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo games had some of the most memorable and evocative soundtracks of all time. Think of a game like Secret of Mana or Final Fantasy III, aka Final Fantasy VI. Those are just amazing games. I know I'm talking about Super Nintendo games, so let me say something like Sonic the Hedgehog 3 or Streets of Rage, iconic musical scores that still stand the test of time. Nothing about Sylvester and Tweety and Cagey Capers stands the test of time. Not the platforming, not the background music, not the limited use of vocal samples that only just makes you want them more, not the items that you seem to collect for no purpose, not the fact that you're chasing Tweety without Tweety actually doing anything in response other than flying away. That is so unlike the cartoons. Okay, here's another example of that. Think about some classic Tom and Jerry cartoons. When Tom is chasing Jerry, Jerry does all kinds of things to foil him. He'll put a rake in his way, so he'll step on the rake and it'll whack him in the face. And then he'll turn around and step on another rake and it'll whack him in the face. Or Jerry will rig up some electrical cord so that when he steps on it, he'll get a shock and his whole body will go bzzzt. Tweety Bird was clever too. Tweety Bird would foil Sylvester in many different ways. And this game shows none of those things that Tweety would do to stop Sylvester. See, there you go. The claws can destroy the stacks of boxes, but they can do nothing else useful other than that. A cat with the most useless claws I've ever seen. But yeah, there's no classic Tweety Bird capers here. You'd think the cat could actually climb walls with his claws, because Lord knows I've had enough cats in my lifetime that could climb up damn near anything with their claws, but no, you have to stack up boxes for Sylvester to get from one area to the next. Vertical scrolling levels don't have to be bad. Super Mario Brothers games, especially from 3 on, have loads of vertical areas that are fun to play, but vertical traversing in this is not fun. And see, here we go. Sylvester has Tweety, and then the level just ends. I guess the only reason for the items is to collect a bonus at the end of the stage. Too bad you can't actually use the items. And then we just reset to another apparently cartoony skit with no explanation of what happened at the end. There's no continuity linking any of these things together from one area to the next, from one stage to the next. And as much as I wanted and really badly wanted to like Sylvester and Tweety and Cagey Capers, this is just not a good game. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Thanks for watching.